Elena Roche's Classical Art Education Center is a Blue Ridge Academy's approved vendor. Before we dive into painting 2 and 3 object still lifes, we have to get this out of the way. The color of an object we see depends not only on the color of the illumination, but also on the strength of this illumination. When an object is illuminated by light of medium strength, the object's color is best revealed. Weak light, such as semi-darkness, weakens the intensity of the object's color, painting the object the color of the light air environment. Strong light significantly paints the illuminated surface of the object in its own color. The more intensely an area of the object's surface is illuminated, the more it is painted the color of the illumination. This is especially noticeable on glossy surfaces, where glare-filled areas of the surface almost completely lose their object's color, displaced by the color of the source. When depicting objects in a sketch, we must convey the general color of the lighting of their surfaces. This is the first part of the lesson where we take this theory and put it into practice. Because this is for beginners, I am also going to go into a bit more detail on how to draw the cloth convincingly before we paint it. Before we start, let's take a look at this cloth, right? So we can paint it 4 different ways. I don't want to take too much time on this because we'll be practicing a lot of other still life with cloth, but let's do it 2 ways because it's very easy for us to do it right in class here, right? So I will first leave it the way it is, kind of reflected light diffused from the windows, so it's not direct light, and you need to spot the difference in painted just in such a way that shows that there is definitely a difference in how this looks, right? So let's take a look. You just stay there and I will turn on the light and you can see the difference. And then just what is the difference we're looking for? We're looking for change in colors, right? The values also change because this is a much stronger light, so the light becomes lighter. The darks might become darker, right? Because of that contrast. But also the color changes. So let me turn it off again. Yeah. And you kind of need to let your eyes get used to a darker environment. And after a while, you start seeing more details, right? But which one, how would you describe basically which one is warmer, which one is colder?
Well, this one's warmer because it looks more purplish.
In the light, yeah. Right? In the light, looks more purpley. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in the dark, it looks more like a royal blue.
Okay. And when I turn off the light?
Yeah, it looks more royal blue. Like
just lighter and darker, right?
Yeah.
If you were to have those 2 side by side, how would you describe the color of the darkest parts of the shadow compared to each other? So like, look at it right now and look at it now.
Well, of course they look a lot more prominent.
Mm-hmm. Darker, right?
Yeah.
So here the difference between light and shadow is less.
Yeah. And there's less shadows in general. Because on this one, it's only red at the creases where you kind of see the shadow.
Yeah.
When you turn on the light, it's like the whole thing that
right.
dips in the
right.
shadow.
And therefore, what we're practicing is to see that difference and practicing to capture those difference in color, right?
Yeah.
So we'll start with that because while we still have daylight, we have a nice reflected light from the windows. So we can do that. And then as the sun goes down, we'll turn on the light and then it will be perfect for that. So I am doing it smaller, yours is going to be like 3 times larger.
Okay.
So you'll do 2 separate panels, right? For the demo, I have to do it smaller. Basically, look at it and go like, remember how I was teaching you to transfer the angles? You see that basically it's something of a trapezoidal shape that the fabric fits into, right?
Yeah.
So at the top, one corner is slightly higher than the other, so you can capture it lightly. And you don't have to like totally fit absolutely everything in, but there, here. I transferred the angle right where that other fabric cuts off over the tops, right? All right, so that's fine. Now that I captured that, I need to figure out the height to width, right? So if I say that for my study, I would like it to come no lower than this area here, right? So then this will be my height. And so there's a little bit of a space here. And then what is going to be my width? So again, you go back there, you measure the width, the widest part of your cloth to the height. What is the tallest one? The way I am seeing it, how I measured it out with this section that's extra, it actually, my whole pencil width becomes the width of the cloth, right? So no wider than this, no wider than this. That means my cloth will not dip beyond this line, but it will somewhat go up like that, right? So now we'll quickly transfer the angle. So angle on this side, something like this, allowing for this rise here, right? Because somewhere from slightly off of center, it's going to be rising. So I transferred this. It kind of gives me the point for where this corner is. I'm kind of guesstimating that it comes close to the bottom, but not quite, because here it's where it's going to start turning. And as it turns, it's going to do something like this. So let's get this angle. Let's see if this is correct, right? So again, we are doing a very light construction. So that's about right. That gives me intersection with this line that established the very low portion of the whole cloth. And that means that if I drop against exactly straight line, up and down, right, it's going to point me to some place up here. So go right to your cloth, put your pencil up, and see, is that about how it's turning out? Or should it perhaps move a little bit more this way or that way, right? So I'm looking at it, I'm seeing that where it comes up, and the cloth dips, it kind of wants to be moved here. It intersects it a little bit more. So that means that I just need to move this a little bit more over, more like this, right? A little closer to the center of the whole thing. Center being somewhere in here. This is one half, the other half, right? But it's not a symmetrical exactly object. That's why we're only lightly focusing on the center, just for the sake of getting this shape correctly. So that means here it's going to go up. And for the sake of this being balanced with where it dips down at the top. So we're not totally messing up the shape of the cloth, but it's more or less correct. All right, so that means we got this one. So now we can connect the lowest portion with where the highest one's going to be on this side, even though it's sort of like a gentle S on its side, right? So something like this. Let's connect that. And now see how I intersected it here and coming out of here, but it's supposed to be a gentle S on its side. So before we do that, let's just make sure that this corner here and this corner here are nice and balanced. So you put your pencil flat, exactly parallel to everything, and you compare how those corners relate to each other. What I see is that this part and this corner are parallel to each other. There we go. So that means this has to be slightly lighter. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to round it here to go to be a bit more rounded. I'm going to bring it up here, and I'm going to dip it, and then that becomes my corner that's going to go up. See? So this gave me a main direction. Oops. I could have had it a bit stronger, and it is kind of very close. And now we're going to get this direction, and that will point us to the top, right? So basically you have to draw this cloth twice. So if you could focus on it once, pay attention to all of this, and then just basically duplicate it again close enough. Doesn't have to be like twins identical. All right, so this is fine. Now what the last thing for the main shape is to find this dip, right? Obviously there is a little bit of width here. So let's guesstimate the width based on everything you drew already. It seems easy, kind of that fit seems to be proportionally all right. And now remember how I was focusing on this bend here and where it came up? Now I can see where the dip is compared to that line. So I'll go back to my lowest portion, that point, see how my pencil intersects the fabric, and what I'm seeing that it's right next to it, like this. Not on it, but right next to it. The other thing is we can measure how it is compared to the center as well. It seems to be right half and half, close to being on this center, right? And this is where I lightly indicated our center. If you want, you can draw it. You don't have to. You can just always put the pencil to your mark and see, oh, here's the center. So this is makes sense that it dips the lowest on the center. But the other thing is this distance. Maybe it's dipping a little bit lower, right? So now is the time to adjust. What is the easiest way? Do you want to tell me the easiest way to find how far it dips?
Well, I would say find halfway point. That's what I would probably do.
You can also divide this whole distance in half.
Yeah.
And compare, right? You can also take this distance in your fabric, in your model there, and compare it to how many times it fits in the rest of it, right? That's your main proportion. So let's do that and see if that gives us an easy way to see. I see that what I see measuring is that this fits into here, but I have it almost 2 times. It's nowhere near 2 times. It's more like 1 and a little like quarter or something, right? So that means I have to bring it lower. So it means it has to be somewhere in here. Good. So let's guess this. Now take the second guess and compare. Okay, so here's now it's 1 full time, and now it's a little shorter than a half. So it's starting to get closer. I said it was more like a quarter, so it means it should be more like this, right? That means that this has to be just a tad lower, because now we're getting very, very close. And since we're very close, there we go. Now it's more like what I've measured. Okay, so good. So since from the center, now I'm looking at the fabric hanging there, I see that the lowest portion is perhaps a bit more on the center. No, the lowest portion is slightly off center. That's what I just compared. And from here on, there is this turn. So again, I'm putting this turn as my main guess because I see how the fabric folds. You can also line up your pencil, bring it here and compare, right? So seems like it's close enough. So it doesn't go very far because then it changes going in one direction here. Then there is a fold behind it, almost like halfway between these two. So it's going back to this point here, and it's kind of bending a little bit in this direction, right? And then the other portion that's coming from this corner is overlapping here, kind of like that. All right, so it also has a bit of a curvature, but we're going to get the main direction first. Line up your pencil with your corner, with this fold, and like, okay, I see that it goes basically to here like this in a straight line, and then it goes past this line, past this fold, right to here, then it kind of has a bit of a arch way, a little break, then it folds again, and then it disappears off under that other fabric. So that's how I'll leave it. Now it's a good way to add, like here it's kind of curving a bit, so it's not super straight. It has a bit of this kind of curvature, and that's what makes it look more fabric-like, that the fact that it's bending. Now I've done that, I want to come in here, compare that, smooth this out. How does this fabric bend? It also has like sort of some of the more sharp transitions and some a little bit softer transitions, but for the most part it's curvy. Focus on the curvy part. All right. This one here, if you look at it, it's almost straight, but it has a bit of a curvature. So let's get a little curve, and it's pretty long curve, and just toward the top it starts to kind of bend in a slightly different direction, and then it dives under, curving more. Very mild, but it's there. All right, so let's sharpen this one. You see, I'm not shy in making my lines dark because the whole thing is going to be, it's pretty much dark blue, right? And with this little bit of light, everything is going to be dark blue, and the shadows are going to get even darker. The good thing is that we have that white fabric under and that wooden board behind that are much lighter, right? Helps us see just how dark the cloth is. It's a good comparison. So let's finish this fold here, see how it folds under here. And what I'm seeing is I'm seeing that this is forming a little trapezoid here. So here's my little trapezoid, and the other part goes up, and it kind of splits in here. Basically, it's the same direction, but there is a little bit of a split, and that split disappears into here, this split disappears into there, but the main fold's still heading into this corner here. What do I see next? So now I see this kind of V-shaped folds everywhere, right? But so I don't pack them too close here and then have too much space here left and no folds because I packed them too close to this one. And this one is fairly small. I'm gonna work from this end and from this end toward the center. So on this side, for example, one easy one is the one that starts from the lowest point here, right? So we can already connect it to this one because I see where the shadow leads me on the fabric. It kind of goes to this, where this little bump, that turn is, right? So first you can connect it with a pretty much almost straight line, a little curvy line, and then add detail to it. So I see that here it goes a bit straight first, and then it has two curvatures where the shadow is. One is a little stronger curvature that goes up and blends into that. And the other one, it disappears behind the other fold here, but it appears right here, and it's not as curvy, but it also goes into this one and kind of disappears in here. So right here you can go ahead and shade it right away. Just like what you did with your reflections in the metal cup, you shaded them right away, dark reflections. Here we go.
The shape of this reminds me of an Egyptian cat.
Yeah. All right, so the next fold then is coming out close to here, and then there is another one that's coming right to this other turn here, like a little pointy part. So let's do this one. So it's kind of going where? It's coming up and going somewhere in here, but where in here? See how over here you see this portion narrower than the rest, right? So divided based on what you already drew, how you feel those proportions, and now we'll connect them. So that's the main direction of that fold, and change between light and darkness in there. But then look at the shape of it. It seems that it's a very gentle S. super, super stretched out, gentle S. Like here it's turning this way, and here toward the bottom it's turning this way. There we go, gentle S. Now, if you see those gentle S's and curvatures and subtle changes, and you make them a little bit stronger, your fabric will look a little more dynamic. So sometimes artists do it on purpose. They emphasize all those subtle turns to make it look more dynamic, like there's more action going on and so on. And if the fabric has a lot of very deep folds, but you want to soften the effect, you go the other way. You don't emphasize them as much, you de-emphasize them, right? So here we're trying to first do it a little more accurate. From this other turn, I see a very super mild, barely visible change in value, and it's kind of going toward this end of this fold, and then it just disappears. It gets stretched out by this curvature. So I'm gonna add it here. Also gentle S, and I see that another change in value from that same fold also connects to this one. That's where your curvature makes big enough change to where here it's facing toward probably that window, picks up that light, and here it's facing now away and toward the wall where there is no light except for the diffused reflected light. But you see how the two of them connect nonetheless. One of the things you learn here in drapery, just through even the simple drawing like this, is everything has to connect and make sense. So if there is this fold, it affects all the other folds. So if they go off and they don't point to this, there better be a reason for it. If there is no reason, if this place is where the fabric is tucked in, is not pulling all of this folds toward itself, and some go off and not in that direction, then either it looks like a mistake, or you better explain what else underneath changes the flow of the fabric, right? But obviously here we don't have it, it's a flat wall. That means they better all be pointing there. All right, so we got that. So the other fold is going to be doing something like this here in between these two. And now I'm also comparing this distance to this distance to this distance. I'm looking at the drapery there. I'm going like, yeah, it looks pretty good. It's close enough. All right, so that means out of this fold, another one is coming out, and it's coming kind of close to where this makes this turn, slightly above it. So let's put one end in here. That's indication for one end of this fold. It makes a V shape, and the other part of this V shape goes hiding behind this fold, and the top part of this V shape, slightly less deep V, is going and definitely connecting and hiding right behind here. Not like all the way to the top, but where it disappears, it's slightly lower. Okay, so that's what I'm gonna do. I'm going to connect them first, straight line. And I'm going to connect this to straight line first. And then I'm carving the shape of them. Here, it's obviously doing it more like this, scooped. The scoop continues. And where is it going the other direction? That mild S, but right before it disappears into this darkness. The other one, what does the other one do? It widens here, the V deepens, and it's also a bit scooped here. It kind of tightens in here because the shadow becomes much darker. So it has a little wider here, it tightens, becomes a little closer. But then it also goes like a scooped motion toward this fold. All of this is very, very dark, and this is medium dark until it gets closer to this shadow where it becomes a little more intense darkness. All right, so now we position that. Now we have that one in the middle, a very prominent big V, and then the other one. So far seems like they're all fitting in very well. So if I say the other V, where the light and shadow values change, if it's somewhere in here, like slightly offset from this V, is it correct? What you can do is, again, put your pencil to what you're looking at, where those two folds are, and transfer that angle. And if this angle pretty much matches, then somewhere on this angle, from this V to the next one, is going to be your turn. Now you just need to determine whether this width is good enough, whether it should be further away, closer, or where. If you can't quite sense these proportions, you can measure. But pretty much what I'm looking at is like, I have this width here, and I'm looking at from this corner to this next fold, and I'm seeing that it is a bit wider. Not a whole lot wider, but a bit wider. So if this is the width, about the same width would be here, and a little bit wider would be here. See? And that's how I'm sizing it up. So here's going to be my one fold. I'm looking at, when it goes in this direction, it's almost flat across. That's why I'm putting it flat across and not very long. And then it starts heading up and under. So essentially part of this fold comes over here and participates in this fold. So if I bring this here and then I wrap it under, it's going to connect with the curvature of this fold and its shadow. So again, you can do straight line and then you can add the curvature. You can slightly add the curvature in right away. Okay, so all of this here is going to start getting darker, and right here it's going to be your closest part where this is going to be lighter, and very short distance away is your darker shadow starting. That darker shadow, here it's going to be like wrapping this way, right? And that darker shadow kind of also has a shape of its own almost. This is where it's lighter, and here from this point on it points down and creates another shape. That's the darkness that hides behind this lighter portion of this fold. I am not going to touch on it just yet because I want to finish this and see where the bottom of it is, and then we'll fit all of this inside here. So all right, so part of it is light, part of it is dark. So I'll focus on this as part of the edge between light and shadow of the fabric. And I'm going to bring it right in here because that's where I see the shadow becomes deeper, darker, and again it's sort of like almost a mild S. Why? Because right here it goes in this direction and here it starts bending in the other direction. All right, so right here is also where this shadow is becoming darker and the light disappears behind this fold, and this is that part that is much darker. All right. Do you have an eraser for me? I would like to clean up some things. Thank you. So now that I've sketched in this shadow, I'm looking and seeing like it's a bit too wide. So that means we can add a little bit more here. Make this a little bit fuller, healthier fold. Just like that. There we go. So focus on your proportions. If you make it a little wider, it's not a big deal because you're not at the very advanced stages yet. But that also splits away and connects to that V somewhere in here, right? So where is that deepest part of this V? It's not so far from this edge, actually, so you can even guesstimate. So if you naturally just project this nice line in a very nice mild curvature here, and it kind of wants to hide behind here, so you look at it and you go like, does that make sense to what I'm seeing? Seems to be making sense. And so you keep it. All right, so now that we are hiding it here, we need to just clean off a little bit of this because this is where we have more light, and I shaded it all. And the top of this has a little more light, and where it hides behind, it does something like this and hides behind. And here it's like a very tiny, tiny sliver of light before it completely disappears. All right. So now it makes better sense compared to everything else. So remember how I was saying this darkness kind of comes in here. It's almost like, it's almost like a head of a bird, you know, beak, and then it flows in. All right, but that also kind of follows toward this edge, combines with another, almost combines with another light division where it's not too dark, and creates another one that goes in this direction, and that I see is much darker, and that is the one that makes this light stand out more and kind of folds under here as well. So something like this is happening. All right, then when this light goes in here, it also combines, and so this shadow starts making better sense. Because then we see like this part and this part are part of the same plane. It turns and goes under. All of this becomes your lighter plane, somewhat lighter than this and this. And right here, it has a strong turn. This is the lightest portion, and this is kind of also lighter, with a little portion of it being slightly darker toward here. But those are the nuances in the future. And so now that you've gotten this more or less sorted out, we can fill in more of our light and shadow and smooth out whatever the lines that are too rigid, perhaps. So like this one here, let's give it a bit more curvy look. And the light over here will be right on this edge here, right? I see that the light is very thin here. This is where your light's gonna stay. This is where your light is gonna open up in this direction. This is where this fold is going to start getting darker, but it's so delicate that right here it's lighter again. Then it's all darker in this kind of way. The fabric is folding away. So this is a very mild curvature. Here it's a little bit more rigid and a little bit more kind of flat, the way it folds. So we can go ahead and darken all of that and figure out what is lighter and darker within it later. Sharpen that. Okay, this we already figured out. This one here, it's going to be, again, between the very light in this context and medium, with the darkest portion becoming toward here. That's where it becomes deeper. And how does that darker area connect to here? You look at it and you see like it wants to point more or less straight right toward this, but then the turn starts to happen. So this darkness, even though it becomes a little lighter, it still is considerably darker than right on the edge. That's why I keep cleaning it up so I don't lose it in the painting process, so it's easy to see later on. All right, so then right under here it also gets darker, even darker than this area for a short time. This is kind of dark until it gets right to the edge, and then the very edge has that stronger light. And then what is happening on the other side? Same thing, that pinch, where from a very narrow it widens, this becomes more light, combining with this. And this is darker to various degrees. Darkest toward the pinch, less dark toward the other areas. Okay. So we can darken this now, combine, make sure that we definitely don't forget what is lighter, what is darker. And here it's kind of going from that darkness slowly becoming slightly lighter, but not so light that it competes with this light here. And this is also not so light. Where is it the lightest? But right here, right? So all of this is going to be, even though it's getting lighter, it's not going to be super light. All of this here is leaving us a little lighter edge, mild shadow. Where is it the lightest? But again, right on this edge. So basically this is definitely getting darker, but not as dark as all those darker shadows. And we are treating our lighter areas on this dark blue fabric as nearly white right now. That is to tell apart. So when you're painting, you can still see it very well, and then sort them out later. This actually is not as white. I just don't want to lose this line right now, this transition. All right, so like this, with this being lighter and this being lighter. And here they kind of both combine on the edge. Make sense so far? And the only thing we haven't touched on is right here. So here I see the lightest portion get slightly wider, nice and wider area, and it's coming up, kind of becoming more or less white. So I will only shade this mildly to remind myself that this also turns away, with the main transition between here and here kind of taking place along this edge. I think there's a little bit of another fold back there. So I'll just indicate it with a line. So basically you're done with your main layout. What you could do is, for fun, add a little bit of shadow here. See how the shadow follows the curvature of the fabric and at a slight angle. The shadow also emphasizes all of the folds on the edge. So the shadow gives away where the fabric folds stronger than what your angle of observation may be showing. That's the shadow. So you see the lowest spot turn. This is its shadow right here. This turn, this is its shadow. This turn comes up here, and that corresponds to that, and all of this gets fitted into here and connects up. All right? Now we will go to painting. So far, so good? Mm-hmm. All right. So the easiest way is to get it started with one strong value. And we are focusing on this being cooler overall compared to our next one, right? But the 2 has a teeny bit of a purpley hue in some places. So I will add that, but not too much. I don't want it to be too purpley. I am going to test it out right here. What do you think?
I think it could be a little more, maybe, it looks a little light blue.
Okay.
You know?
Well, yeah, if it's light, I can go with more layers, but the hue overall.
Oh, I think maybe a little more rose-ish.
How is that?
That's better, yeah.
Yeah, right. So you see now already, because I'm standing here, and I have that white fabric under the drapery, and I have this white here. So basically it's like a giveaway. You're comparing it to what you're seeing and your paper. All right, so everything's pretty dark, so I am going to be very bold, which is why I was so bold with drawing all the lines so strongly and dark. Just gonna go and cover everything, minus the shadow. Why is my rosiness not looking rosy? All right. So while this is still fairly wet, you can come and pick up your highlights. One is that it helps you not lose them. The other one is that it's easier to make them more subtle if you pick up some of the paint rather than paint around them, you know, paint the first layer and then paint around them. It's just plain easier, as long as you don't pick up too much paint, right? Like to where it's too bright. This one is already drying too much, so I'll come in here and soften up this edge. All right, so those are nice, good little built-in reminders of where the fabric is lighter, basically. But now that the first layer is drying up, you can see how fast it becomes much lighter. The shadows on this, what do you think they look like in terms of color?
They're definitely very dark.
Yeah, they're very dark to where it's starting to be hard to tell what color they are, right?
Yeah.
Good, so that's what we'll focus on. Instead of trying to figure out what color are they, we'll just keep darkening and not worry about the color itself so much, as long as it doesn't look too reddish, because they definitely look cooler than the rest, right? So, for example, first I will go ahead and separate my light from shadow just a little bit more. Okay, this is too purpley. I put too strong of a pink in there. All right, so correct that. Separating my definite light from shadow. And this here, a soft transition, so I'll do a soft transition. Where there's sharper transition, keep them sharper. Where there's softer, keep them softer. This is still wet, so I won't touch that yet. This whole thing is first slightly darker, and then I'll go and do even darker shadows. Right. See, because I drew all of those shadows in right away, right now, I'm only focusing on getting my lines correctly, the flow of lines, and the change between light and shadow. Because I'm already seeing everything painted down below, so I mean drawn. All the lines, I see them down below. They're all drawn out. I don't have to worry about them anymore. Here it was a little too Windsor bluish, so I added a little more pink, my rose. So let's do this edge as well. Finish this one. Perhaps a bit more rose. And this is where the distinction between light and shadow is kind of very mild, so I'll soften it up right now. All right. I need to let this dry for now, so I am going to add a little bit of the board background color and the down below the shadow on the white fabric. So if I go like this, how's that for my board background?
Pretty good.
You don't think it's too strong?
Well, once it dries, I think maybe it might be lighter, but it is a little strong, just like that.
So we don't want it to grab too much attention from the fabric since it's the background. So I'll add just a tad of my fabric glue to it. So it's a little more grayish warm and not so strongly open orangey brown, you know. So that will eliminate this end. We won't be comparing it to white paper anymore. It will eliminate this here, so we don't compare this edge to white, pure white. Don't want that. Still is considerably warmer, so just like that board there. Okay, and here. Okay, we're not seeing that white paper anymore. Good, so it's not confusing us. By the way, now that I put this in, the blue fabric, what I painted already, doesn't look so dark anymore.
Yeah.
And we need it darker. So let's add that shadow. So down below we have like a bit of a white fabric, but the white's not pure white, right? So it has a bit of a grayish hue because of how the distant light hits it. So I'm going to create this medium gray. Get rid of this white. And this is our white fabric that gets a very diffused, reflected, cool light from elsewhere. Now the transition between the fabric itself and the wall is not important. That's why I'm not focusing on where is that changes, doesn't matter. We just need that value and color. And now, how we're gonna make that shadow? That shadow is definitely cooler, not as dark as the fabric. And compared to the blue of the fabric, what do you think? What is the hue? Greenish, right? Yeah, that's what I was gonna suggest.
It almost looks like if your shirt and then your headscarf combined.
Yeah. So that means if I add, yeah, probably go darker. That means more blue, a little bit of Indian red, so it becomes gray, and then Indian yellow, so it starts turning toward the greener hue. Grayer, greener hue. Let's add a little more Indian red, Indian yellow, and a little bit more Indian blue. Windsor blue and Indian yellow. I got my colors all mixed up. All right, that doesn't seem bad. Let's add this in. Definitely looking greener and grayer, right? Yeah. And of course, where's the strongest dark? But on the border between light and shadow. That means as our color, as our water and color drips toward this edge, it's going to get darker. It's going to create a darker edge. That's why I'm dumping more paint in here, because we need that effect. Because it lightens up as it goes under the fabric. And it darkens as it goes toward that light, even though it's diffused light still, that becomes a bit more contrasting. All right, I don't see much of a shadow from the fabric on the board, but perhaps just a tiny, tiny little one. So I'm grabbing the same color I made for this shadow, intensifying it a little bit more with Indian yellow and Indian red. And right here, where there's a little bit of connection between that fabric, I'm just creating a very slither of a shadow, as if a little bit of a shadow is being cast here, and I'm gonna create a little bit of a shadow over here. Also helps to soften up this edge so the blue to the bright background doesn't go sharply too, right? It's like perhaps there is some kind of shadow, but it's also very, very thin. And this shadow is affected by the color of the fabric, by the way, right? By the color of the blue, it affects the shadow, adding a little bluishness to it. and a little bit of bluishness is added to that, but it's also very warm, sort of beige brown color, and that becomes a little more greenish when it's affected by the blue. All right, so now we can step in further and do more fabric work. So I'm gonna start with my, again, slightly more purpley blue, right? What can I do now to make it more distinct but darken all of my darkest shadows, right? You see, I'm not doing a lot of wet and wet. It's sort of like a combination between the two. But as we are sharpening the darkest darks, we need to make sure that it's not a lot of wet and wet, because otherwise it's going to be too wishy-washy, not sharp enough. So I actually got my Windsor blue, Indian red, and a little bit of rose. And that is giving me a slightly different hue for the shadows. So let's test it out next to this guys here. Hard to tell the color even, right?
Yeah.
So, but it seems to be looking good though.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go. Where's our darkest darks? Let's first get our darkest darks where they're definitely dipping deep in. All right, it's close enough. Where's the other? Right here. Seems to be very dark. Where's the other? I think one of this here starts intensifying about this place and becomes very dark. One is sharpening, becoming dark right here. The other one, it's like this one's all very dark. So yeah, let's start as a sharper portion of it here. Go all the way and go all the way. Here it's becoming thin again. And I think here it would be good to add a little bit of water and diffuse that toward this shadow, and where it kind of veers away from it. It's becoming darker here and it's darker here. And we're kind of combining those two, and then it becomes very thin again. And what is happening to this one, I'm kind of following that. I see that one of it is disappearing in here. And it's becoming, the rest is becoming lighter. And it combines with that darkness. And now I can grab my darker shadow again and go in here. And this is, it combines in a very thin way here. So here, it's not all super dark. So again, I'll bring just more water and slightly less paint. Combine that. Kind of like that. And then pick up more. And remember how this one was very dark, and I wanted it to stay dark and not combining just yet, because when I go here with dark but not super, super dark, I want this one to still stand out. See how it still kind of stands out and makes that nice, deeper, sharper edge, and the rest is going to be softened up to combine with a lighter area. Same thing over here. We're starting darker, darker, darker. and then it turns and goes away from it toward this one. Soften this up, because this is not a sharp transition, not on this end here. On this end it's smooth, so keep it soft. If some of your darker paint spreads in there, it's not a big deal, because it's not a very strong light. But over here it starts a bit darker and then becomes a bit lighter. And here it's a bit more soft transition on this end, but on the top here it is a much sharper transition. What else can we do? Seem very dark. Hard to tell what color it is. Should be darker here. Okay. Let it spread more. Okay. Where else that repeats perhaps somewhere? It repeats right here. Where it starts very, very dark, and then it spreads and becomes less strong. And that darker line that I put in there first and let it dry, it's still there. And it helps to make that toward the edge where it goes behind the other fold, make it look darker and sharper. All right, where can we punch up that darkness again? Right here. Can punch it up, make it more sharp, and then diffuse it. So diffuse it, less pigment, more water. Okay, but what I didn't do is I didn't work on this softer transition here, so I'm going to edit now. Softer transition, soften up, so it looks more like it's a curvature. Where does it stop? But right here, where it becomes looking like it's much more pinched toward this point, because that's where the fabric makes a more radical turn. And here it's mildly dark, becoming slightly darker, because I think there's another little curvature in there, but it's so mild, it's only like you start noticing it when you look at it for quite some time, and you start seeing those nuances, those little changes. All right. Stand back and take a look. And overall, what needs to be darker? Yeah, I see. So some of this could be a little darker. But now I'm taking my a little more purpley color. I'm not taking my very, very dark one. Some of this could become darker toward this pinch point where it makes a more radical turn. And then it becomes lighter. It becomes a bit more dark on the edge because it's turning toward the wall. So there's a bit of that. I'll let it dry and see. It's probably going to be light enough by then. This little bit of a difference here, we can work on that a bit because this is slightly darker than this part, but only very, very slightly. And as it goes toward this transition, it becomes slightly lighter. It's lighter here on this corner, and then it starts getting darker again. And as it gets darker, it picks up more darkness. Here, more darkness toward the bottom. What is happening within this here, because this can't be the same as that. They have slightly different nuanced changes. So this fold mildly continues through here and turns right in here and becomes very light. Becomes pretty much so light that it's nearly the same as the rest of the lighter area. Lighter, that pinch point. But as it goes deeper behind there, it starts to get darker. So all of this is less light here, so we can darken that. Okay, that's good. We're seeing this transition. And then what happens on this edge? Here we have a slightly darker edge where this shadow in this turn, they kind of let us see a slightly darker, stronger edge transition. And right here, there's a slightly stronger transition. But like with all those areas, it intensifies when it gets closer to light, and it becomes lighter when it gets away from that light. And then as it comes down here, this stays lighter. There's that other semi-pinch point, and then it starts combining with this. So it's more and more away from light, less and less light is reaching it. So intensify that transition, and then let the rest of it kind of mildly blend. And let this part be slightly darker than the other part. So this part here stays slightly lighter, this stays slightly darker. Helps to show that turn from one plane to another. Okay. And within here, like this is pretty much all uniform except for where it gets very dark here. I'm looking for slightly different changes, and I'm seeing that actually it's a little more intense here. And it gets lighter toward the top, and it gets slightly lighter toward this side. So that's what I'll do. I'll just intensify one little part of it, let the rest be. And now we can intensify slightly all of that, push it further away from us. And how do you push it away from you? But by even at slightly darker values. So it's, your eye focuses less on that, less contrasts. And to kind of echo it on this side, because this is starting to look a little too light compared to that, I'm going to do a little bit more intense shadow over here, a bit more intense, but not a whole lot, right? A little more darkness here, and more darkness on this corner. This corner seems to be turning away considerably from even our diffused light. This whole side is folding away. Okay, okay, okay. And now I'm going to soften this up. Well, probably good to give it a very mild value. Soften up the changes in here and soften up this because it's not very strong. It's not so bright, and this is not so bright either. So where are the brightest ones? The strongest light transitions? Kind of like here, yeah, and maybe a little bit right in here, right? So here I already do have it very strongly looking, and here I kind of lost it. So I will pick up a little bit of paint here, just to give it that little punchier look. All right, so compare the values now. So the main point was, since I'm close to being done, what is the main difference? Here, this still doesn't look dark enough. When you're looking at the watercolor study and that over there, what do you see as the difference?
The fabric compared to your painting?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think just that fabric looks a little more rosy.
Uh-huh.
But overall, oh, and then the highlights are more popped.
Yeah.
It's more contrast. So yours pops out more than that.
Right. Mine is stronger contrast, right? Which is better than not have them.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can always tune them down, right? So once you're studying, you're doing all the studies, it's good because now you're looking at it and you're going like, all right, so it seems like I got everything, all the folds in place, got all my values, except that mine is a bit sharper and I'm supposed to paint this more mild light, right? I'm just widening this shadow because it looks a bit wider there. All right, so that means that now you can let it dry, go over with washes to adjust that color. Because remember, first we're focusing more on value than color. At the end, we adjust the color. So now that's that time to adjust the color. While it's drying, I'm gonna give a little more to my shadow here, make it look more like a shadow rather than a blob. I'm not even going all the way up, I just need a little more intense darkness on the edge. Now, I can make it a bit more rosy, and remember in the beginning I was afraid to do it too rosy. By just getting my rose. Just get my rose color, mild wash, and go over it. So for example, this, I have this color, I can experiment. If I go like that, how would that be?
Well, I think it's nice.
Yeah, I think it's pretty close. Considering that all of the different values, light and darkness in here, I think it will work. So let's see. Also, by adding that value, I will soften up the contrasts. One technical thing, the paint will simply blend a bit from the brush touching it, and the other is because it's going to be a slightly darker value that's going to go over everything. But do I want to go completely over all, even the highlights? How's that? Or do I want to leave them a little bit popping someplace? That's the interesting part to decide on. Well, the hue definitely changes, right? Here, I'm sure I can go over that, because that's not a very strong one. It doesn't need to pop. But here, just in a few places, I would like to leave it not quite all the way rosy. While it's all wet, and I have my wet and wet technique, I'll darken this side even more by letting it turn away more toward the wall. Darken that. Darken this a bit too. Make it turn away toward the wall more. And I will get in here, for some reason it keeps looking lighter than I want it to be. That's working. Make this a bit darker. Now I'm not doing my rosy, I'm picking up back my very dark paint. I want it to go darker here, but stay lighter everywhere else. Is that too rosy? Pick it up. All right, so I can add a bit more rosiness right here to kind of give it a bit more emphasis of my rosier hues. So if you are a lot more stronger color variation someplace, it's good, because if the value changes, color changes, right? And obviously we have overall this much more purpley feel, and if it's a purplier feel, it stands to reason that somewhere in here we can allow more purpley colors to pop. In some places they can disappear, and other places they can be stronger and appear, and that's all good. Let's add a bit more rosier pass in here, and I seem to see more rosy shade over here. All right. Oh, this turned into kind of a blob. Okay. Before it goes completely dry, add more paint. And restore that. All right. By the way, if you have any of the drips left at this point, don't worry about it. It's actually good. Any of the drips within that. All right, so now the fabric is not quite so contrasting, but this still jumps forward, right? At this point, you can decide whether you actually want it for easier readability of the fabric or if you want to tune it down a bit further. And of course, you can tune it down a bit further if you're definitely looking for this part disappearing. So, for example, if you were painting a person or any other scene where the drapery has to be pushed into the back, you would be doing just this kind of work, where it's in the back, it's far away, we still see some folds, we don't see totally everything, and the light on it is quite diffused, so we tune it down. We tune it down further, right? So it's not quite so contrasting. Making sure, obviously, that those that are a little more poppy, light and shadow contrasts, are still popping. And those that aren't and shouldn't be, aren't popping. Like this one, still feel like it's popping a bit too much. So let's give it another mild pass. Push it slightly further back. All right. Tune this one down, tune this one down. At the end, if you lost any of your folds, if you think like, oh, something should have been a bit sharper, come back and just pick it up a little bit with your brush. Because at this point in this study, chances are you just need to pick up a little bit to make it just a little more like visible, like right here. Maybe just a little indication, and then it disappears again, right? It's like it continues out down to here, and then kind of disappears. It's not very strong. And you don't want to make it just so visible that it jumps right at you. And basically that's how this goes. Next time I turn on the light and we'll see how it changes, right?